Dragi predstavnici mediji, najprije to je vaš dan. Dan novinara, onda i sa moje strane sve najbolje, srećna dan novinara. I pošto ja sam bio u bivšem životu isto u novinarstvu, pomalo je i moj dan. And thanks to the Minister Vujović for putting together this conference. I understand it's the first time the ministry is organizing on this very day this conference. I think it's a good initiative. Thanks for putting these topics on the table. And yes, what is freedom of the press? Freedom of the press, freedom of the media is obviously the lifeblood of any democracy. And even more so the lifeblood of a democracy like Montenegro, who wants to join the European Union. And therefore, without it, I think we can truly say that our societies, without the freedom of the press, they will not be free. And this conference today is a good platform to reflect on the progress made in fostering a more supportive environment to free and professional media, while identifying concrete steps to address the challenges that remain. For the first time, and this is really good news, the Commission report, this is the yearly report, which you well know, which usually comes out in the autumn, last October, it really was able to say, well, you have made progress in this area. A positive assessment when it comes to the freedom of expression. I think it's well deserved, primarily due to the work which was done in reforming media legislation and adopting the national media strategy with extensive involvement of media and civil society. The collective effort was instrumental also, of course, last year in securing the famous EBAR and serves as a strong example of inclusive and transparent work. We hope to see this approach being applied also to other key rule of law areas, particularly, and I mentioned that many times already, and I will continue to do so when it comes to electoral reform. While giving credit where credit is due, I think we must, of course, not lose sight of the critical work that lies ahead. Freedom of expression remains a cornerstone of Montenegro's democracy and a pivotal factor in the country's progress on its accession journey. Above all, Montenegro must uphold a zero-tolerance policy to any form of violence against the media. Last November, we all still remember, Montenegro witnessed the most serious case of violence against a journalist in recent years, a physical attack on a Pobjeda journalist, Rajkovic. The swift initial response, that was good, by the police and the prosecution is commendable. But it is certainly not enough. Effective judicial follow-up remains essential, and we will continue to monitor the proceedings closely. Also, by the way, there are things which happened in the past, in the further past, actually. Montenegro needs to step up the efforts to ensure that justice is finally served in these so-called old cases. The case 2018 of the wounding of Ms. Lakic, and of course the killing of the journalist from Dan, Mr. Jovanovic. And by the way, this is, I think, also something very important here, and as a message to the authorities. Impunity, I think, is the worst message you can give. Impunity, when it comes to violence against journalists, is, prevents the deterring effect. If there is no action, if you can beat up a journalist, and yeah, you have police doing something for 3 days, and then the judicial follow-up is being stopped or leads nowhere, like in those cases I mentioned, this is the worst service you can do to democracy and the freedom of the press. We've also seen senior public officials openly and harshly criticizing and also suing the media, which constitutes undue political pressure. And this must stop. Journalists must be able to work free from all forms of violence, including harassment and intimidation. Next, we need to see the new media laws consistently also not only being adopted, but also being put into practice, ensuring that the provisions on paper translate into real support for free and professional media. Later today, you will discuss the important issue of the fight against disinformation. Montenegro has taken, this is good, the first steps in establishing an institutional response to disinformation and foreign information manipulation. The national media strategy has recognized the importance of this fight, and we understand that work is underway to establish a specific body to address disinformation. We urge you to continue swiftly to bring this plan to fruition. The fight against disinformation is a fight for our democracies. as citizens and authorities can make rational decisions only if they are based on true and verified information. However, as important as it is, this is also, let's be honest, an uphill battle with an uncertain outcome. Just last month, we saw some global tech platforms, actually some of the giants, dropping fact-checking and relying on alternative methods for moderating content. This is a very, very worrying development indeed. In the European Union, this matter is strictly regulated with the new Digital Services Act and the Code of Practice on Disinformation, which big tech companies are required to observe. Failure to meet the DSA standards could result in penalties, including fines of up to 6% of the global revenue and additional 1% for repeated violations. So these are real fines which are out there, which also will be used. We are talking about billions of euros in potential fines here. It's also important to note that the DSA, with which Montenegro is ultimately expected to align before accession, does not define what online content is legal or illegal. That's not the case. That's not the point at all. The EU doesn't censor on what is on the internet. And yes, there is another important lesson to be learned here, which is the fight against disinformation should not be misused by authorities or other actors to label differing opinions as fake news or to silence criticism. Ladies and gentlemen, let us continue building on the progress which Montenegro achieved over the last years, and together, by fostering a culture of accountability, professionalism, and mutual respect, we can strengthen the democratic fabric of this country and secure its rightful place in the European Union. As we move forward, let us remember here the words of the famous American writer and journalist Walter Lippmann, who said, "There can be no higher law in journalism than to tell the truth and to shame the devil." Journalism, at its core, is a very noble mission, one that upholds the truth and holds power to account. By embracing this responsibility, and yes, there is a lot of responsibility which comes with this job, about being factful, about being fair, about having due diligence. But by embracing this responsibility, we can ensure that media remains a pillar of democracy, one that empowers citizens and upholds the values of transparency and justice. And the European Union stands ready to go with you, to be with you on every step on this journey. Onda još jednom srećan dan, novinara.